In this lesson, we're going to talk about functions. And as you can see on the first screen here, I have a little function machine guy that we are going to learn how to use function rules in order to calculate an output from an input. Okay, one of the first things that we need to look into is actually the definition of a function. And as you can tell in red, I have typed on the screen a relationship that assigns exactly one output value to each input value. So in other words, each input value gets one output. The other thing we need to look at is a function rule. And a function rule is just an equation that describes a function. Okay, and so we'll look into how to write those in a little bit. Okay, here's an example of a function machine. We have an input and we have an output, and then we have a rule that indicates what's going to happen with our numbers that we use for input. So let's just write a basic rule. Let's say 2x plus 3. So for my input, which is going to be the x, if I input a 1, I'm going to multiply by 2 and add 3, so my output, which is my y, would be 5. If I put in a negative 1, negative 2 plus 3 gives me 1. If I put in a negative 4, negative 8 plus 3 gives me an output of negative 5. So it's very similar to the table of values that we used for graphing, where you're putting a number in for the input, running it through the rule, and then getting an output. Okay, function notation is just another way of writing the rule in math terms. So we're taking the function rule and writing it in math terms. Okay, so let's look at an example. This is an example right here. The total cost of S smoothies is going to be whatever the price is times S. So we want to go ahead and put this in simpler terms. So since I'm using S as my variable, I'm going to say the total cost parenthesis subscript S is going to be equal to whatever the price of the smoothie, and let's say the smoothies are $2.50. S. Okay, so depending on how many smoothies I get will determine the cost. So if I substitute in for S, the variable, let's say I'm going to substitute in 2. S equals 2. So I would write the total cost for 2 smoothies is going to be $2.50 times 2, and that's going to equal $5. Okay, so that's using function notation and figuring out the cost of a smoothie, taking all these words and putting them into a nice short equation. Okay, let's go ahead and look at another function rule. Most of the time you will see it written as f subscript x, the function rule of x, and in this example on your notes I have negative 4x plus 12. And I've asked you to go ahead and use the input for letter A. I want you to use the function of negative 7. For b, the function of 3. And for c, the function of 8. So all you're going to do is substitute the number in for x. So negative 4 times negative 7 plus 12. And that's going to give you 28 plus 12, which is 40. Okay, go ahead and do the next two and we'll check your answers. Okay, f of 3, you're going to get negative 4 times 3 plus 12, which is negative 12 plus 12, which equals 0. And for the function of 8, negative 4 times 8 plus 12, negative 32 plus 12, the answer is going to be negative 20. So if you know how to evaluate, replace variables, and solve, that's pretty much what you're doing with the function rule. Just taking an input, these are all inputs, and getting an output. Okay, two more things that we need to define. Domain of a function is all the possible input values, and the range of a function would then be all possible output values. Okay, so we're going to set up a little table here. X and Y. Input is X, output is Y, and we're going to use the function f of n, which would be n standing for any number, to n. Okay, so we're going to put values into the table and calculate it through our function machine and get an output. So if I have 1 for x, 1 times 2 is 2. If I have 0 for x, 0 for y. If I have negative 3 for x, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. If I have 5 for x, then y is going to be 10. Okay, so we're just putting values in for x, multiplying them by 2 to get our output, so that we are seeing how our domain, input, and range correspond with each other. Okay, here are your 3 got it problems, and what I would like for you to do is take these functions and use at least 3 values. You can choose them. Make a little table that looks like this. And what you're going to do is you're going to choose a value for x. For example, for the first one, if I choose the value 1 for n, then I'm going to take negative 3 times 1 and add 2 to get my output. So negative 3 plus 2 would be negative 1. So what I want you to do is set up 3 little tables like this. Choose at least 3 values. You could do 4 or 5 would be nice. And then set up your function, and we'll take a look at these then tomorrow. Have fun.